All right, the stream is
Here we
live.
are. Yes, we are. Hello and welcome to the Cavern of Chaos, Maximum Perspective. And today we'll be talking about people who died, unfortunately.
And
Uh,
other things.
yeah. Last week we lost Peter David and Todd Smith.
Todd with one
Uh,
D. Who
Todd one.
I don't know his work that well. I know I remember Todd Smith, unfortunately, because I think he was the guy who came on and his work was more boring than Keith Giffen's on Omega Man. Uh so it
I
was like a fine Omega Man. Keith Giffen was doing it. It was kind of exciting. Then I think it was Todd Smith came on after, and it was just kind of a little dull after Keith Giffen.
I saw his name. I did not recognize it, and then when I saw the credits, it was like, oh, I picked up some of those books.
Yeah.
But I knew like he was one of those artists that came and went, and I never really stood with. I never kept up with what he was doing, so it was
He was
still
around
one of
for a
those things
little
that
while. He got a who is it? He also did some comic strip work. Let me see here. The Daily Cartoonist had a little something on. He did Vigilante. He did some of that too. He was 72. Where we
He could
got
be that
here?
old.
He did Zorro with Thomas Yates.
Right,
The
because
Income.
his style was good for comic strips. For comic
Yeah, it
strips.
was. And they even have some of his a couple things of his humor and like con stuff that's pretty good too.
I may have something of his around here, like maybe one story here and there.
Yeah, what else did he do here? It says Omega Man, that's right. Green Hornet, Wolverine, the Punisher, Spider-Man, Vigilante, and and Elvira. That's right. I think I'll have to look at the issues I have. So I think Bob Wyacek inked him on Elvira. That was some solid stuff, I remember.
All right, we have people popping up. So we have Tim the Comic Collector saying, "What's up?"
Hello
Also,
there.
Sleepy Reader
hello,
is here,
hello, sleepy reader.
and Missing Mars, and straight from the time stream, Timey Wimey Limey.
Welcome, one and all.
So Terry Kavanaugh now has a YouTube show.
Oh yeah,
Yep. I think he's on 247 Comics. Terry Kavanaugh was an editor for Marvel, late 80s, early 90s. Also a writer. But
That's debatable. Sorry. Yeah, to me, no.
I never read any of his writing, so I don't know. But today, he and I think whoever runs the channel interviewed Stephen Platt, who was Terry was, I think, Stephen Platt's first editor. And the story of how Stephen Platt got into Marvel is insane. I'd never heard this story before. But first, let me show you who Whitey was. Jesus Gonzalez. You remember Whitey?
I do.
Of course you do.
But I only knew him as Whitey. I didn't know his real name was Jesus.
Jesus Gonzalez was his actual name, but nobody knew it because he went by Whitey because he grew up with a bunch of black guys and he was the only white guy. So he got the nickname Whitey. There he is. And note he ran the stat machine. This right down here, this black gridded thing is the stat machine. And you can see he has all this artwork. Well, it's all stats of artwork. There's all his favorite stuff. But I just wanted to show you a picture of Whitey, just because I have one in his natural environment there. Just wanted to show it. And so Stephen Platt was telling the story. I think he was in art school. He decided he wanted to do comics, blah, 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 blah. But he was like up in Canada. I think he said he's in Toronto now, but he was up in Canada. So he was in New York City for 3 days trying to break in. tried going up to Marvel, tried going up to DC, but they're like, no, send us your stuff, mail it to us. And I think he said he tried to go to a couple of signings of people. It was not happening. On his last day there, he goes into the bank, and it's funny how this like whole story couldn't happen today, because he goes into the bank to cash travelers' checks. Because who cashes travelers' checks now? Nobody. And he saw somebody in line in front of him wearing a Marvel jacket with all these Marvel characters on him, and he was like, "This guy must work at Marvel." I guess it was the bank. He must have known where Marvel was too, because he was in a bank near Marvel. That's the only reason. And Whitey was there cashing his paycheck. It must have been a Friday. Because on Fridays at lunchtime, everyone would walk to the bank and cash their paychecks.
And
The people.
at that time
And
period,
nowadays, who cashes a paycheck?
exactly. That's what. And in that time period, it would have been a Citibank.
Yeah.
That's before we switched over to Chase. It would have been a Citibank. And if it was the one nearby Marvel where we normally cashed our checks, you would walk uptown. It would be on Park Avenue South, but you would have to walk uptown about 4 or 5 blocks. And that was the Citibank that we mostly cashed our checks at.
Mhm.
And I remember we had like special IDs for that.
So
Hello,
Stephen
Comic
Platt.
Crack.
It's Comic Crack. Stephen Platt is in line at the bank on his third out of 3 days there from Canada. So he's like, I got to talk to this guy. So he starts talking to Whitey. Oh, where'd you get that jacket? And Whitey's of course like, yeah, well, I got it up there. I work there. And so Stephen Platt had his artwork with him because he was trying to show it around. So he's like, oh, I want to show you my artwork. Da, da, da. And he could tell Whitey was like, ah. He's like, but he couldn't get away. I was in line with him. So he said he showed Whitey's artwork, and Whitey was like, whoa, there's something here. So then Whitey told him, come up to Marvel 2:00 and ask for me. And sure enough, Steve Platt was like, I was outside the building at 1:30. There was no way I was going to be. I think Whitey said 2:00. Don't be late.
It's just knowing Whitey. That's funny. It's just to give out that order.
Yeah, I know. You can't imagine Whitey saying that. So anyway, he said, I was there at. You met a guy from Canada? Did you ask if he knew me? No, this is Stephen Platt's story about how he got into Marvel. He saw Whitey in line at the bank, Whitey who was wearing a jacket with Marvel characters, who happened to work at Marvel. And Stephen Platt was like, I got to talk to this guy. I bet he works at Marvel. And sure enough, he did. And so at 2:00, he went up there. He was describing Marvel too. He's like, it's all behind glass. You can't get in. So of course, Eri called. He came up and said, I'm here to see Whitey. Eri, who was the receptionist at the time, called Whitey. Whitey came to the door and got him, and Whitey showed him around to the editors. And it was like, that never happens. It is amazing. That's just, first of all, like I said, Whitey's the stat room guy. The editors got no reason to listen to him to begin with. But he left packages, he showed the work and left packages there, and they liked his work. But it was just like, whoa, that's crazy.
That is wild.
It's like if Whitey hadn't been in line that day, we might have never heard of Stephen Platt. It is insane how things happen sometimes.
And to put in perspective of that time period and who Whitey was and where we were in there, it's like, Jared mentioned it before. It's like, the bullpen is completely different than editorial. And the only time we got talked to, if editorial needed something, and they were more like orders, not, hey, could you do this? It was like basically, here's your orders, and then go, don't question it and stuff like that. was a hierarchy, and it was very strict and then non-strict. It really depends on who you were talking to, because you had some people that was very friendly, and others they would just talk to you
Right.
if they had to, and then that was it. And yes, I can say that yes, you could walk into the office and talk to somebody fairly easy at that time.
Yeah.
But again, it was one of those things where there's probably very few other people that could tell that particular story of how
Yeah.
they got in. Because everyone I've spoken to has got into Marvel or broke into Marvel a different way. Because every time they got in a certain way, whatever crack they got into, that crack was sealed. And no one has that story. Again, it's like one of those things that it was really odd in that situation.
But
So
if you
that
want to
was
hear
wild.
Stephen Platt tell the story, go over to Terry Kavanaugh. What do they call it? I forget the name. Just look up Terry Kavanaugh. I think it was 247 Comics is the channel that Terry's show is on. But I found that just crazy, that story. And I don't remember hearing that one before.
No, I have not heard that one at all. I I would have thought that was a story that Whitey would tell.
Yeah, you.
Right.
I discovered Stephen Platt.
Yeah,
Because by the time I got
I-
there, he was
in
already
line at the
working
bank.
on Moon Knight.
yeah.
He already
And
had Moon Knight down pat and stuff like that.
and I showed you that picture of Whitey in his office too, because Stephen Platt describes um going in, because that's the first place he went. He went with Whitey, so he went into Whitey's office and he saw all the artwork all over. He's like, "Whoa!"
Yep, and that room had a distinct smell, and
Photochemicals,
the photochemicals.
Stop Bath and Developer.
Yep,
Yep.
That we don't do anymore.
not at all.
But I was like, wow,
Completely different
that is
thing.
some crazy story that Stephen Platt accosted Whitey at the bank line.
Because also in that time period, you have to remember too that if anyone had something that had Marvel paraphernalia, it was either you were a mega fan, because people
That's
weren't just walking around with shirts that much. You could only get them from like Comic Images, and
that's
so you had
true.
you buy the shirts, and then the jackets were more expensive. So chances are, if you had a jacket, you might have been working for the company, because we would
Because
get those
they
at a
didn't exist.
discount. Yeah.
It
So
was like a what do they call it? A Letterman jacket. Remember those? I think that
yeah,
was it.
those were the expensive ones. I had the hats and I had the sweatshirts, because once a year we would get a list of what we could buy at cost, or at least half price anyway.
Yeah.
Because you knew Marvel was getting those for free, and
But yeah,
somebody
you're right.
somebody was getting.
There were no like coats like that out in the world.
No, not at all. You could only get t-shirts.
Yeah,
You
I hadn't
couldn't
even
get
thought
like,
of that.
yeah, the jackets. Who was it? I believe it was one of the marketing guys said, because he had a Marvel jacket, he was in San Diego, and he was renting a car, and the guy noticed his jacket, and it's like, "Oh, where'd you get that jacket?" It's like, "Oh, I work for Marvel. I'm here for a convention." And it's like, "Oh, that's really cool." And before he knew it, the guy upgraded everything on the car and didn't charge him anything. So he got a better car, and it was all because he was just wearing the jacket, and he was just talking comics with a fan. And it was like one
Yeah.
of those cool things. It's like, you gotta get me one of those jackets.
Sleepy Reader asks, how long did Stephen Platt stay in comics?
Not particularly long.
Not more than
No.
3 years, I think.
He does conventions now because he's doing a convention with Terry, I think, this weekend. I forget where. But you know what's
Remember,
funny too? When
he was doing Moon Knight, and he was poached by Liefeld, and he did Prophet.
well, first he was doing Moon Knight, and then he was poached by the X Office to do Cable. And then I know Rob Liefeld has some not very flattering stories about him and his ability to get
Cable?
work done.
He didn't do Cable.
I don't know. I don't know if he ever actually did it. I know that they wanted him to, because he was originally, I think he said Sarah Mossoff, who I think was Terry, worked with Terry.
Because the guy that Liefeld poached from Cable was Ian Churchill.
No, he said I don't know if they poached him or tried to poach him. I don't know if he ever got there, but he was doing Moon Knight, and they told him, I think he did Moon Knight for Marvel Comics Presents. So he was doing stuff for Terry at Marvel Comics Presents. I think that was his first thing. Right. And then Sarah was editing Moon Knight. I think she worked in Terry's group. And she called him up and said, we want you to do the next 6 issues of Moon Knight, but it's canceled. It's canceled. They knew then that it was 6 more issues and then canceled. Do you want to do it? And he said, sure. And after about 3 issues, the X-Office wanted him to do Cable. And he was like, I want to finish Moon Knight first. So he didn't say if he ever actually got to do Cable. So I don't know what he did after Moon Knight.
And I don't remember him on Cable.
How at the time...
He might have never made it to Cable. That might have been where the trajectory was going. And then by the time he finished off Moon Knight, he might have got poached again in this time by Liefeld for profit.
Yeah, they were talking about how at the time, Liefeld and Jim Lee and everybody who had a studio at Image were just recruiting guys. They were just throwing money, because they were making so much money. They wanted to expand, so they were just recruiting as many guys as they could who could do comics. So they were expecting that Terry was since he did Marvel Comics Presents, he always, which was kind of a training ground, he always expected his guys to not be there long. But so I don't know if he did anything for Marvel after Moon Knight. But it's funny, when those pages came around the bullpen, we were like, this guy's gonna burn out. He's like, he is, because he was, if you saw the original art, he was drawing so many lines that would never print. So he was spending so much time drawing these tiny little lines that would never print. This is before all the nice paper. This is before digital. So it's like if this guy doesn't learn to not do this much, he's going to burn out. And sure enough, I think he burnt out under Liefeld. He didn't say he did, but that's kind of the general.
You got a 40K, the story, you got a 40K advance, and then to do a new comic, and he didn't.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
40K.
Yeah, so he talked. I think
94.
He worked on the first Iron Man movie. He was mentioning.
Hmm.
So he did concept art for there and had a real good time. Though he's not allowed to talk about it because his non-disclosure contract has no sunset policy on it.
Really?
Yeah. So he's like, but I'm not allowed to talk about it. I'm like, come on. Really? All these years later? You're still not talking about it. He wasn't allowed to talk about casting. He would talk about how much fun it was.
Right.
Working on that movie.
I tell you, Marvel's good at making you sign stuff. I had to sign paperwork when I was leaving, and it was like one of those. All right, it I don't even remember exact wording, but it was something to the effect that I wouldn't say anything negative about them after I left. And I was like, I wonder why they make you sign that. And it's not till years later you realize, wow, I was really taken advantage of. It was like, what is, you think back every once in a while, it's like, they were really upset about the library. And the work being done, and that if I have enough time to do the work for the library and do the work for the art returns, because at some point I was being investigated, but do you need help? It's like the artwork comes in, the artwork goes. Is there anyone complaining? No. It's like, okay. You find out later, it's like, oh, my department costs money. My department does not make any money whatsoever.
Right.
Apparently, they can't have that. So it's like, you know, are these books getting done? Well, yeah, the books come in, we get them bound, and we continue the library. No mention of the fact that I didn't run the library. Sorry, I ran the library. I wasn't hired to run the library. I was
Right.
given the key and said, "Could you hold this?"
And
So it's like we didn't get promotions. We got more jobs to do, and
yeah,
no extra money about it.
And
and it
Comic Craft
wasn't
was
a
asking
Tundra thing.
Tundra.
It was a
No.
Rob Liefeld Extreme Studios thing. It was an Image
Yeah.
comic.
I don't think it was for profit. I don't think it was for profit because it did a couple of issues of profit. I'm not sure
Yeah.
they were coming out with a new number one.
Was Prophet his or Liefeld's? Did
Yeah,
he get
Prophet
a?
was Liefeld.
Yeah.
Okay, so he didn't do his
Pro-
own projects with him.
Yeah, Prophet debuted in Youngblood number 2 or 3. Can't remember exactly.
Crazy, crazy story.
Oh yeah.
Huh.
And Sequential Geek is here. What's up?
Hello.
Costa. Have some pasta.
I did have pasta for lunch.
But also he said that drawing with that much detail was sort of his natural inclination.
Well, if he was working for the French market, they would have gone for it. Although I don't think
He
anyone would have
he
hired them.
grew up on European comics.
Ah, that explains it.
Yep. He mentioned some names too. But yeah, he was like, that's why that detail was normal to him, because he grew up on European comics, seen a lot of them. Matter of fact, he said he was in art school. He didn't mention what art school he went to. I think he was a comics fan like in his younger days, but he never thought he could do comics because of his crazy, weirdo, detailed style. But then he saw, it wasn't until one of his fellow students who was really into comics showed him McFarlane's stuff. And then some of those, he was like, oh, I can do this.
European cons. Yes, I've run into one or two over here. Yes.
One or two.
I hear they're okay. They don't just go on and on. They like tell you a story and then they finish. Really weird.
And
Yeah,
they
what's
have
that
boobs.
about?
Yeah.
Boobs. They're about boobs.
And they're naked too. Very distracting.
Very sinful comics. Nothing but sin.
Not a single superhero in the bunch.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about Peter David.
Peter David.
Peter David.
Yeah, what a waste. Peter David had been ill for a while, because I remember one of the issues he had was that not being able to afford health care was because he didn't pay taxes.
From what I've heard over the years about the taxes stuff is that he had gotten money, but he was in the middle of a divorce. And when he got paid for some project that would have taken care of the taxes, he had put the money in the bank. And just as the money got cashed, he was writing the checks. And his divorce, he was surprised with a divorce, and she took the money out. That was the story I heard. And I don't know where it went from there, but it was one of those things where he had just gotten the money to make his payments, and it was taken from him, from his ex. I don't know how much of that story is true. It was one of those early internet things that was published when he was first talking about, oh, I have this problem that I need help with. And this is early, crowdfunding type stuff that happened. That was one of the stories I've heard about. I've never other than that like article that I recall reading decades ago, was what I heard about it.
That just reminded me another thing Stephen Platt said was when he was on Moon Knight, he got a call from Tom DeFalco, and Marvel wanted to put him under contract. He said he was like 23. He didn't know what to do. But he had they said one of the things Tom DeFalco said was, "Oh, you get free health care with the contract." And he went, "I'm Canadian." Not much of a draw for health care paid for by your company when you got it already.
Would you like to come live in the United States so you don't have health care and we can give it to you? No, that would have been convoluted.
But I'll say this about Marvel, at least in those years that I was there. I recall getting glasses and the lady that I think it was Pearl Vision was doing my information. It was like, oh, and she was like, do you have health care? It's like, yes, my company provides me with the health care. I gave her the information. She looked it up and she was like, wow, you guys got amazing health care. And I was like, oh, that's cool to know.
Yeah.
And it's like, and it's a shame that healthcare did not extend to people that that was outside of the contracts, that the freelancers
Right.
Did not get that, and it's a damn
Freelancers had
shame.
no access to it.
Yeah, it's like, and that's insane.
Mm-hmm. The
So
one thing
I don't have much Peter David Spider-Man. I have a few comics here and there. I've never even read the Death of Jean the Wolf, but I do have Spider-Man 2099.
Uh-huh.
This is the Brazilian edition. Yeah, so the Brazilian Spider-Man 2099 first started as a 48-page magazine, so it's rather flimsy. And this is issue number 2. It has Spider-Man 2099 number 3 and Punisher 2099 number 1, which is not Peter David's, of course. Is the Punisher. But yeah, we have
Tom Morgan Punisher.
Yeah. It's Spider-Man's story. And I think that out of we like talking about Ravage, and I get everyone agrees that that Warren Ellis's Doom 29 was very good, but I think from beginning to end, Spider-Man is probably the best comic of all 2099s.
Mm-hmm. This is my Peter David book. This is the Future Imperfect Hulk.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
By George Perez. Everybody, is this his most famous work?
Peter's most famous work?
Yeah, it's close.
It's close. I mean, his run on the Hulk is what most people remember. And
right.
I read the Hulk long enough that when I first started reading, Peter was writing it.
Mm-hmm.
The Hulk changed colors. The leader was the main villain. And I stayed on that series all the way until the Hulk changed colors. And the leader was the main villain once again. And that was my joke about, being on the Hulk for so long. He was on the Hulk issues where there were like major changes made into the Hulk that is still part of the character today, where you eventually had the smart Hulk. And I think Peter's run made Hulk was always popular to a certain extent,
right,
but I think Peter added more to him over the years, where he made the character more interesting. Like there's an explanation of why the Hulk changed and stuff like that.
I don't know if we were talking about it last week or not, but one of the things I said that's hard about writing the Hulk is he's one of the heroes you always have to reinvent and come up with your own angle on. It's like the Hulk from my childhood was the childlike Hulk, who he was for a lot of years. but writers eventually tired of that. So now, like, Peter David kept coming up with new angles.
Yes.
And if you're going to take over the Hulk, you've got to come up with a new angle. Like Bruce Jones and John Romita came up with like making him the fugitive angle and having the Hulk off camera a lot. What's Al Ewing came up with the body horror Hulk, the immortal Hulk there. So it's like you don't have to reinvent Spider-Man. You don't have to reinvent Captain America. You don't have to reinvent Iron Man. You have to constantly reinvent the Hulk. And I think he did that pretty well.
Yeah, I agree. I think he did.
And, Future Imperfect is one of his reinventions of the Hulk.
Yes.
Like, the one of the things, I liked this one, but he did another, either a prequel or a sequel to it a few years ago. I read I've read a few issues of it. One of the things, this one, not so much, but that one even more. I think that one was like the rise of Maestro. And I found it tough reading a story where the Hulk was the villain.
Right.
Like, this one's only 2 issues, and he's not even in. Like, that one was like how he killed everyone to become the Maestro. So I was like, reading a story about the Hulk being that much of a villain, I was kind of like, this is tough. This isn't easy to read.
Yeah. Sleepy Reader says on GoFundMe, they said the Medicare money wasn't enough. You do have to cover 20%. I imagine there's a lot of other exceptions.
Right.
Yeah, and as usual, when comic book professionals need Medicare, it's when they're not making that much money anymore.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Brazilian
The
edition
only other
printed on the finest, smoothest paper. Not quite. This is newsprint. Yeah. By the way, there was issue number 5, and it has the Vulture 2099, the cannibal one.
I think this
one
is
has
the
2
first
Spider-Man
printing.
stories.
This came out in first printing August 94. So this is like the first printing of the trade, because Future Imperfect was only 2 issues.
Yeah, it was a two
And then
two
they put
issue
it out in
prestige
trade.
format.
So it was cheap too. Where's the? Oh, hold on. The price isn't on. Is the price on the back? Where'd it go?
It should be on. Isn't it on the barcode?
No, it's not. This is before they put it on. I know I saw it something. Maybe it wasn't this one. I don't see a price on it. It's free. That's weird.
They printed a few editions of it, and I do recall that one of them that I have is a misprint because the story stops and then starts over again. Oh,
The price is on the spine. That's the only place it is.
Oh, $12.99. I thought it'd be $9.95 if it's that. If it's an old print.
Nope, they were making some money off it. And the only other Peter David thing I have, I didn't even know I had. I've got here's another trade of, what is this? Hulk. This looks like the Dale Keown Hulk.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's issues.
That's not quite Dale Keown.
397 to 400.
Oh, that's not Dale Keown anymore. I think the.
Let's see, who is it? Looks like him. The Gary Frank, Dale Keown, Jan Duursema, and Chris Bacalo. So it's a few people.
So the art you're probably showing was Duursema. Yeah, that's not Dale Keown.
And I want to say that's when I noticed it. That it's like, oh, he changed the Hulk. And the leader's the main villain. So that was like the tail end of that series when I first read it. Because when I was starting to read the Hulk, it was around.
That's Jan Duursema.
It was after issue 300, because the 300 was the one where he was on the run.
Yeah, this is 400.
Yeah. So yeah, when I started, he was just, I think, starting out on it. Because I remember, like, eventually McFarlane was on the book.
Like I said, I don't know where I got that from. I mean, I must have picked it up in Marvel. but I
Yeah,
don't
it might have
remember
it
it.
might have been with the comps.
Yeah, it must have been. I probably said I should read some of this.
62 Lefty Blues is here. Hello.
Good evening.
You notice that crack is the wrench? Yes, he had to post a link the last time he was on. Doesn't matter because I have a wrench on his channel as well. So
Ah,
okay, so let's show some more Brazilian comics. This is the Hulk issue number 97 with the
Yep.
leader and Todd McFarlane.
Yep.
Yeah, this is one of Half-Life's early appearances.
who is that?
Half-Life. It's a villain that you're that Peter David come up with. I think the idea was to do a riff on the missing link. The guy's radioactive and he kills people. Taking away Hulk's energy, Hulk's gamma energy. We also got some Iron Man stories in this one and New Mutants. Ooh, this is Kevin Nolan. Nice. A couple of issues later, the famous cover.
Ah,
Oh yeah.
McFarlane and
versus Wolverine.
Wyacek.
Yeah. The coloring is not quite the same because the Brazilians did their own coloring. They got the black and white art. And I think he made a very animalistic Wolverine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Todd was definitely good for that.
Some more New Mutant stories. Yeah. A little further down the line is issue number 163. So Dale Keown is gone. This is Gary Frank. Gary Frank, when he was trying to draw like Alan Davis, which is better than what Gary Frank became. Oh no, this is actually no. This one's Roger Cruz art inside. Right. Roger Cruz, the guy that kept copying Joe Madureira panels.
Ha, ha.
Although I don't think he's
I
copying
think
much.
Gary Frank's best work was on that that stuff he just did on that mini series about the robot that I can't name. There was a lot of expression. I remember showing that off, going, "There's a lot." Gary Frank doing his expressions. It's like there was a lot of gesture, like stuff you don't usually see from him like that.
62 Lefty Blues got my Metal Hurlon Kickstarter in the mail this week. The first book, the poster, and Arzak art cover.
Uh-huh.
Showing off the Arzak book. Yeah. Well, Arzak is a bunch of short stories, so it's easy to come up with new ones. I then got, after those Hulks, I then got the Visionaries. So
Okay.
so it's the Wolverine cover again, but he was recolored for this one.
Less bright.
Yeah. Let me check out the same page that I showed. Yeah. Yeah, so let me put myself big. Yeah. So the colors, they did follow the original covers, but they're not identical. So here the brown is actually lighter than what the Brazilians did, because McFarlane didn't ink over the mask. That's why it's all brown. It's usually portrayed as black. But the thing is, here it is black.
Right. Was McFarlane inking himself?
Not really.
Who was his inker on those Hulk books? I don't remember.
Some he inked himself. There's Bob Wyacek, Jim Sanders, and the the Gustaviches.
Okay.
This Wolverine story is inked by McFarlane. The Man Bull story looks like it was inked by McFarlane as well. Yeah. Yeah, most of these are.
Like, I don't remember McFarlane having an inker. Like when he was on Spider-Man, did he have an inker?
No. Okay, this one is inked by Wyacek, and you can tell. You
Mhm.
can. I suppose if he'd gotten late, which was perfectly feasible given it was McFarlane.
Then they'd bring inkers in probably.
Yeah, but Wyacek does a great job here.
He's really talented.
Oh, there's Felix the Cat. Because McFarlane always draws Felix the Cat.
Oh, that's right.
Yep.
He sneaks them into pages.
Mm-hmm. And then we have this one. Now, this one is Dale Keown.
Yep.
It's the merged Hulk storyline.
Has Dale Keown done anything in years? What is he?
He's doing things because it's part of Comicsgate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's doing Kickstarters and stuff.
Yep. All right. So this one still has Jeff Purvis art. Because it's Countdown. I think the last issue of Countdown was the first Dale Keown on Hulk.
Who drew issue 300?
300. Well, that's way back.
Was that before Peter David got on?
Yeah. It was part of the Crossroads storyline, so it may have been either Sal Buscema with Jerry Taylor or Mike Mignola.
Okay.
Okay, so this is first Dale Keown, and he was inked by Maurice Severin, so it may not look like typical Keown yet.
Yeah.
Although you can see the poses. All right, so there's a Sam Keith story here.
Hulk 300 with Bill Manto.
Yeah, it was still. Yeah, it was still the Crossroads storyline. Yeah, so we got some Sam Keith in here, and then okay, now this is normal Keown because it's Bob McLeod was his usual inker on the Hulk.
Oh yeah.
So here's Freedom Force. Whoops. Yeah. Keown was a great superhero artist. Even if he was good with monsters, he was very good as a superhero artist.
I remember his pit looking real nice.
Uh-huh. Lots of action. You can see the movement on Keown's art. Oh, and this is this is still Keown.
It looks like Peter David's first Hulk story, or at least starting the run, was 331.
331. Okay.
Here's Doctor Strange. Yeah, because Hal Milgram had been writing the Hulk after Byrne quit.
Yeah, I don't remember when I stopped buying the Hulk. It might have been around 300.
I think you once mentioned it was you stopped at issue 300 because that was a nice round number.
Yeah, let me check my database. Hey, my database won't open.
Hey, Ranger Sly is here. We've already mentioned Canada, so but Dale Keown's Canadian too, isn't he? Peter David. Peter David was Jeff Purvis. Here's the thing: nobody really says that Jeff Purvis is their favorite artist.
No, that's crazy. What kind of crazy talk is that?
But Purvis was not bad. The thing is, he came in after Todd McFarlane.
Right.
It was always going to be jarring. He kind of disappeared. Yeah, I don't even know what Jeff Purvis did after the Hulk.
No idea. I don't know either. Let me see. Where are...
Tammy Wimey has a Felix toy.
So it looks like during Alan Milgram's run of the Hulk, he let Peter David write a story. Then he jumped back on it, jumped back on it, and then a few issues later, Peter got the full series.
62 Lefty Blues X. Wilson, did you get a copy of Robo Wolf by Jake Smith?
I did not see it. The new comic that I got that was kaiju related was Detective Kaiju. That was the one that I picked up today.
Detective Kaiju.
Detective Kaiju. And it's exactly what you think it is. And it was so much fun because it reads like a noir detective story. It just happens that the guy is a monster, is a kaiju. And someone actually calls him a kaiju, and it's like, what is that? I've never heard of that. It sounds like a curse. And it's exactly what you would think a story about a kaiju who's a detective. You could get all the detective tropes in it, and every once in a while within the story he flashes to a time where he's actually a monster. So it's interesting that you're not even sure narrative wise what's the real world. So, and as I read this on the subway on the way back home, and one of the things I enjoyed was the size of the fonts was so nice and big that I was able to read it and enjoy the heck out of it. And it looks like there's only a couple of, because I didn't have my reading glass with me, but it's written and lettered by Michael Calero, illustrated by, I think that's Kit Willis, and then it's also colored by them. So there's only 2 people on the creative team that puts the whole book together. And so far it's been a lot of fun. And it's because I saw this cover. The cover grabbed me because it's an homage to Frank Miller. But this book also had quite a few covers.
Is that a Dark Horse book? Right?
It's not Dark Horse. It's done by Massive. Is the name of the company.
Massive. Okay.
Massive Publishing. But it looks very much like a Dark Horse book.
Yeah, because they're imitating Frank Miller.
Because they're imitating the Frank Miller covers from Sin City. And I think I grabbed the last one of this particular cover. Because a lot of the other covers were not available. So I think so either it was short ordered or it's selling quite well. So I'm not too sure, but I can recommend it. It's a good book.
I grabbed that one. The art was great.
Yeah.
I think I have some of War for Humanity. That was good.
Never liked. Regis says he never liked Todd McFarlane. Well, yeah. Here's the thing. I understand why people love Todd McFarlane. I also understand why people don't love Todd McFarlane. Purvis just kind of got was just kind of unlucky, I guess. I remember a story that was drawn by Purvis that they were reintroducing Glorian in the. They were doing a Glorian storyline, and he had signed a deal with a Satan lookalike. I think his name was Clute. And that guy was pretending to be the Shaper of Worlds, and he arranged so that the Hulk would have to fight a strange misshapen gargoyle man who couldn't be killed. And the action on that story was pretty good. That was Jeff Purvis.
Yeah,
and they didn't know Marlowe was still dating Joe Fixit. They didn't know that he was the Hulk.
There was speaking of Todd McFarlane, another story Stephen Platt was telling was, it must have been his second trip into Marvel, because he said he got to meet with John Romita. He was, really thrilled about that, of course, and went on about how nice a guy John Romita was. And John Romita looked at his work and gave him some tips. And he said at one point, John Romita was just kind of staring out the window with a 1,000-yard stare, going, I just don't get some of these guys in comics now. Like, the Image guys, he just wasn't getting. Uh, and his Stephen Platt says his work kind of fell in that category too. But he's like he's just staring out the window at this 1,000-yard stare. And he's like, yeah, I just don't get all these young kids sometimes. But that got me to think. And also, Terry had an interesting, what I have called the sort of splash or pinup style of storytelling in those days. Terry Cavanaugh called the focus panel. He's like those guys like McFarlane and Rob Lee. They invented a focus panel way of story. I was like, that's an interesting name for it, where you build the whole storytelling structure around like one big panel. But it got me to thinking too. I think it was only a certain generation in a certain time and place that got all those guys. Because when you think about it, Todd McFarlane, Rob Liefeld, all those guys, who was there? Eric Carson, Jim Lee. They were only around for a fairly tight period of time. Some of them come back and gone away. But there's like nobody like them kind of anymore who sort of recreated created a new way of storytelling. And I think even like younger people from today might not get them. When they go back and read old Todd McFarlane comics or old Rob Liefeld comics, and you're 20 years old today, you might be like, because comics moved in a completely different direction than Todd McFarlane, than those Image guys. And the kind of direction they moved in general, you can still find, of course, people, was like realistic. Basing everything on 3D. Like if you look at a lot of Marvel and DC comics today, the level of realism is what makes them popular, if they can be said to be popular, in a way that like McFarlane and Liefeld, they didn't have realism at all. They had detail, which whatever that means. Lots of little lines on the page. But I think like, whoever, us or John Romita not getting those guys, I think that in the long run has become more normal than getting those guys, because they were around for such a tight period of time where they were the most popular thing in comics. And nobody kept going in their direction. Like, can you think of anyone who draws like any of those early 90s comics anymore? Not Jim Lee, possibly, but even he's moved more into a realistic direction.
I think it comes down to, I would guess, there is it was a unique time period for that to happen.
Right.
It was, you had more books than artists to be able to fill that demand. These guys at the time when they came in, they were fast.
Right.
At
That's
that
another
time,
thing. They were fast.
They were fast. They were very detailed. Their art style caused you to stop and look at the page longer than normal.
Mm-hmm.
McFarlane, we were looking for Felix.
Huh?
Where did he hide Felix? There is so much lines there. For some of the other artists, we're trying to figure out what was drawn on the page. Where does this connect? Does this connect to that? Stuff like that. As an artist, you want to try to figure out and dissect it. What did he put on this page? Because again, so much line, so many things, and each artist did it their own way. There was a similar style, but they all had their own way of going, and so there was a lot that at that same time. And I think that was the uniqueness, is to make all the people stop and really look at each of the pages. And then you had artists who changed their art styles to mimic some of that, like Herb Trimpe.
Right.
That he changed his art style, but he said himself that it was the only way to get work, and he was getting the work because of it. So I think it hit on so many different levels and for different people. So the older artists like John Senior wasn't getting it. It's not a clear because he's a clean artist, for lack
Right.
of a better term. That you could read everything that's there. He was following a certain formula that everyone had to follow. His generation, he had to follow whatever Jack was putting down. So that became like that Marvel House style. So I think the style broke sometime in the 90s and just
Yeah.
before it because everyone was kind of experimenting too. John
Hmm.
Jr. was going through that odd phase from his Spider-Man to Daredevil that he didn't really perfect until he was like leaving Daredevil and going on to X-Men. He went through a really odd phase, that kind of 80s Nagel type of phase for a hot second. And
Yeah.
then he bounced away from that. Um, so I think there was a lot of experimenting going on without people realizing it at that time. And I think influences were coming from other places because you had the black and white boom going on
When's the last
right
time
after that.
you heard someone say, "Oh, his artwork, I just don't get it." I don't think that's even said anymore.
No, I don't think that's said at all. I all I ever hear now is that people are a little bored with the realism,
Yeah.
and and there's so many that I feel like some of the artwork is stiff. We do always hear about, oh, there's too many talking head shots. That was
Yeah.
going on for a long time too, where you have something experimental and crazy, and then all of a sudden not anymore. And I don't know if there's also, we're not allowed to have superstar artists anymore because those
Right,
guys
there's that too.
they took their talent and left, or they took the art talent and left. They didn't all take writers with them.
And
So
Marvel said, "We're never gonna make
we're never
superstar
going to
artists
let
again."
that happen. So and as these companies become more corporate, you can also see that they're not really dipping into the experiment stuff. It's look at McDonald's alone. Outside, it used to be a fun place, or it looked like a fun place.
Yeah.
Now it's a beige looking corporation. And I think
Mm.
that could be the problem with the bigger companies, that they're kind of getting that bored corporation look.
Tammy Wimey says, because when I'm reading a comic about flying superheroes, the one thing on my mind is realism.
Yeah.
Although when the subject matter is fantastical, maybe the presentation should be realistic. Excuse me while I argue the point it myself. Your other self is right. You do need the realistic presentation to make it palatable. Sequential Geek says, I say that about Osborne's work.
He just doesn't get it. Like I think that was the only period in time where there were people saying, "I just don't get so and so's work." They're mostly older people,
Right.
like John Romita. But I don't think like that doesn't even exist anymore. I don't know. It's weird to think about. I don't know and why.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
I
know.
don't know. I do not watch enough of YouTube videos about what people are saying about comics in general, what
Hmm.
they're gravitating to and stuff like that. Um, so I am not too sure what it itself could be. Even reading, like I said, I got some books, and I was going through. I didn't read this issue. I was just flipping through it on the train. So it's Amazing Spider-Man issue number 4. I really like that cover because it feels like a Charles Vess cover without being done by Charles Vess.
Ah, and as I've been saying recently, colorists really have fire down.
Yes. So visually it looks cool. Story wise, I don't know enough of it. There is a lot of energy to the artwork in this.
I,
Hmm.
I, I see a lot of stock poses.
He's liking it on the flip through. Well, that's a weird Aunt May, is that?
Yeah,
That's a
so
strange angle showing us her neck there. That just
it's
struck me.
it's a weird angle. It's a weird because it's like that's the Aunt May they usually have for the Ultimate Spider-Man.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's weird to have a flashback with an Aunt May that doesn't look like the Aunt May we're used to. The oddity of this book is the parts of it that seems like it's supposed to be fun seems kind of corporate. And what I mean by that is like, here's the bullpen bulletins,
Uh-huh.
and they're focusing on artist Corey Andrews. And there's a Spider-Man Wolverine story that I need to pick up because that seems interesting to me, and I like Corey Andrews' artwork. But the design of it, just for some reason, seems like it's supposed to be fun, but I don't know what is it about it that's turning me off about it. And it's the same thing with like the back page material.
It's some corporate editor's idea of fun, but it can't really be fun.
Yes, that's what I think it is. Is that it just seems like, oh, didn't comics used to have this fun type of stuff? Even the letter page, I'm enjoying the fact that the type is huge, but that also tells me they didn't have enough material for it.
Nobody writes long-winded letters anymore.
Yeah. But it's just something about it just seems a bit corporate. And again, the artwork is okay. There's the cover for the next issue. I'm not too thrilled with that Spider-Man. Something seems off on it. Um, but again, it's like, at this point I'm rambling. I'm not too sure where I lost the thread on it, but there's just
Yeah.
something that
There
just
was-
doesn't seem like, it's there, it's exciting, but again, it's just, at least this issue has been a lot more action in it than I've seen in a while in a Spider-Man book. And then again, it's part of the relaunch, and I still got to go back and try to read those other issues. Again, going through what Jared said, it wasn't too great. It's like now I don't feel like reading it because of that.
Yeah. Issue 2. Oof.
62 Lefty Blue says Marvel's corporate ideas of getting crazy is Jeff the Shark. Yeah, let's come up with something cute that we can sell as a plushie.
Well, yeah,
Here-
that's what that is for.
The latest issue of the Power Fantasy, issue 9, has an article in the back by Ryan Hughes, but good comic, by the way. And this is the one that's about superheroes trying not to fight because if they do, millions of people will die. But he writes a few pages on design and comics, and this kind of hits the nail on the head with a good starting point with any new project is to find out what the high concept behind it is. Is there one? Often there isn't, in which case it's up to the designer to concoct one just to give them something to respond to and push against. A piece without a strong concept behind it, however impeccably executed, is mastery without meaning, technique without vision. That's what those pages are, those design pages are. There's no there's no high concept behind them. They're just make it fun is the only thing. There's no, it's what did he say again? Mastery, Papa, is mastery without meaning, a technique without vision. So there's no vision for what those pages should be. There's just somebody told the designer to make it fun, and he went, thanks, and he made it fun by making things crooked and making things bright colors and all the cliche stuff for making things fun.
Right.
But there's no real thought. There's not as much thought behind it as there should be, which is probably why you're reacting to it. You're like, this is kind of empty design.
Sequential Geek says the original Aunt May was like this hidden, overlooked aspect of Spider-Man mythos, the caregiver. Yeah, didn't he have to El Parado eventually went and such?
Oh yeah.
Well into the well into the 90s,
Yeah.
especially when she was running her retirement home, uh, and she met Nathan Lubinsky,
You want to see a
Marvel's
corporate comic
Marvel's
book?
power
Look at
couple.
Batman Hush 2. Flats. I bought that over that 11 by 17 version of the first issue. That was enough for me. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to spend $15 an issue on all the oversized issues. This one's good. And I don't even need to read the rest of the story. Though I did get one Marvel book this week because Scott Koblish drew it. And where is it? Venom Original Sin #1 one shot. So Scott Koblish not only did he do the cover, he did the actual story too. It's double sized. At least I think it feels. I don't know if it's exactly double, but it feels like about 44 pages. And how much was it? $7. And it was insane. It's just kind of I don't really there's a creepy beast. It's a Venom story. There's the jack-o'-lantern. Do you guys know anything about Venom's origin? Because I really don't.
Right now, it's kind of, I'd say it's up for grabs regarding whatever anyone wants to use. Because in the last 15 years, there have been so many retcons about the planet of the symbiotes that I'm not really sure what counts and what doesn't.
Well, I'm talking like Eddie Brock's. But in this, they keep going back to one event, which I assume is in his origin, which is, I don't know if it's just, he made a deal with Jack-o'-lantern to call him when he's going to commit some crimes. And that way, Eddie Brock will be able to take pictures and write stories for the Daily Globe, and his career will shoot up. But when this happens, Jack-o'-lantern gets into a fight with Spider-Man, and Eddie Brock sees these two guys in a warehouse being threatened by the fire, and he doesn't do anything to save them, and they just burn to death. And this kind of haunted Eddie Brock. I have no idea if that was part of his origin story or if it was made up for this.
That does not sound familiar at all.
But one of the key things is Venom, the symbiote, goes back in time to take over somehow. He just moves himself back in time and takes over Spider-Man in his symbiote suit. And he's trying to get Eddie Brock not to be Venom. Because being Venom has ruined Eddie Brock's life. So he's like, listen, just go do other things. Don't be Venom. Here, let me give you this. And once again, I don't know if it was in the original Venom story, but he was getting ready to break a big story about who was this serial killer or something. And he got it wrong. It was really this guy's neighbor. And Spider-Man is the one who got this guy, who captured this guy's name. So like ruined his career.
That is part of his origin.
Okay, that's in here too.
That part about the mistaking who the killer was is part of the origin. That's why Eddie hates Spider-Man, because Eddie was wrong, completely wrong. Spider-Man proved he was wrong, and then Eddie blames Spider-Man for that. Although Eddie was in the wrong the whole time. But it was like, so that was part of the origin. That was, Eddie was a newspaper guy, but he kept getting out scooped by Peter, or at least the photo part of it. So that was where that rivalry of why he hates Spider-Man came from. So that part of it is part of the original history.
Well, the beginning of this story, the Venom who comes back in time to stop Eddie Brock from becoming Venom Jack-o'-lantern ends up killing him. And then Eddie Brock ends up killing Jack-o'-lantern with a cinder block to the head. He smashes the back of his head. And that ends that Eddie Brock, who came back, and Spider-Man timeline. And now Eddie Brock is big time, reporter now. He gets his dream. He's not Venom, but Spider-Man not being in that world leads to all sorts of bad stuff. And then it becomes really philosophical. Who's writing this? Steve Orlando. It starts involving multiverses. It turns out that in every single reality, Eddie Brock becomes Venom and becomes super evil and annoying and unhappy, except one, which I think was at the beginning this story of this guy. I think the same guy at the beginning who didn't become Venom and bashed Jack-o'-lantern's skull. I'm not sure if it was him or not who became this guy here in light blue. He's like the one Eddie Brock Venom who didn't become Venom. And he's like in the future somewhere, like in purgatory, just waiting, trying to get into heaven. But he can't because he's racked with guilt. Because he knows if he became Venom, then he'll be evil and miserable. But being that he didn't become Venom, all these crazy things, all these Spider-Man villains did worse things and killed more people. What did he say here? Who's the guy with the knife? So I'm assuming these are all Spider-Man stories I've never read. Yeah, Dr. Octopus, the Scorpion, the Rhino. The Rhino had no problem lifting a diplomat from a moving train. Some of the other local talent tried to fill the Spider shoes. Puma took on Hammerhead's gang and leveled the neighborhood in the process. So like everything went bad without Spider-Man there. Green Goblin got even eviler. So it's like this weird multiverse kind of story with an evil Venom. The like, I don't know who he's like the embodiment of all the evil Venoms is in the like purgatory with good Eddie Brock trying to get him into heaven. And he's trying to and it's like you got to do evil things again. And it's just this crazy philosophical weird Venom story. Crazy evil Venom in purgatory, the embodiment of all the evil Venoms, wants good Venom to go back in time and save the two guys in the burning warehouse. That's what's going to get him into heaven. And it's just kind of nuts for a Venom story.
Especially this has some Donny Cates BS. That's
no.
referring
This is Steve Orlando.
Yeah, Donny Cates was the one who came up with the symbiote god. And you got some great story how his Venom essence is used to create some sword, I think. 62 Lefty Blue says, sounds like Eddie Brock has the origin story as my first ex-wife.
But it was quite the odd story.
All he's going to do is create a second timeline. Well, here's the thing. Ever since Mark Grunwald died, time travel in the Marvel Universe has no rules.
Yeah, there used to be safeguards with time travel.
The idea isn't that it's going to make something not happen. The idea is they want to get the one good Eddie Brock into heaven. That's what's so that is. It turns out that's the point of the story, is that they can get this. I don't know why the evil Venom. I guess just because he's him too. He wants the one good Eddie Brock to be able to get into heaven. So, forgot about
the story Eddie got wrong. Yeah.
But like I say, I enjoyed it. I mean, it was crazy. But the one thing it had me thinking too was, does this have to be a Venom story? Because often, like with, does it have to be a Venom story? And it might have to, because often with like out there stuff from Marvel or DC, the first thing I'm like is, this doesn't have to be a Batman story. It would be like, what did I think of that Tom King Mr. Miracle? Tom King Mr. Miracle would have been better if it wasn't Mr. Miracle. If it was just some new characters he created. But I think this dealt so much with Venom's history. I think it had to be Venom. But I certainly was not expecting that from this book.
Right.
This crazy philosophical, let's get Venom into heaven.
Yeah,
issue.
yeah, that makes absolutely no sense to me. No. Neither does Star Trek and Doctor Who. But here's the thing: when you use time travel in Star Trek, it's not supposed to have rules. And Doctor Who, I don't think they ever really cared about rules for time travel. At Marvel, they used to have rules for time travel, and they were kind of followed almost to the letter. As new editors came in who don't like science fiction, don't understand science fiction, and couldn't care less about science fiction,
and the multiverse became too profitable.
Yeah.
The
multiverse, instead of being parallel realities who are actually quite different, the multiverse is just a way to launch 200 new characters that look the same as the original one.
Yes. I just personally love the idea of like, oh, you can't create that character. You're going to get people confused. They're going to confuse this character with this character. You can't create that. And they used to protect their IPs on it. Now it's to the point where it's franchising. You want to be a Spider-Man? You could be a Spider-Man.
Right. The thing is, it doesn't create confusion, but it does create dilution.
Yes.
You have so many Spider-Man that the original one is not worth it anymore, and the other ones will never be as worth it as Spider-Man used to be.
Corporate thinking.
Mm-hmm. Hey, we got to put something on backpacks to sell to little girls.
You can't change the laws of physics to write Star Trek, but changing them again next week is eternally consistency. But they never had consistency in Star Trek. Whenever they went back in time, they changed the rule over whether it creates a new timeline or it fixes
or you can't change the past.
Or you can. So it was whatever the writer wanted.
Mm-hmm.
That week. So there's always a consistency.
Marvel that's why I always hated Star Trek time travel, because they were all I want is you to make up the rules and stick to them. That's all I ask for time travel. Mm-hmm. It's not much.
Right.
But Star Trek would sometimes you create alternate timelines, sometimes you can't change the past.
Yeah, the only rule for Star Trek was that at the end of the day, everyone's in the same position and the ship goes off. The way the ship came in is how the ship leaves.
The new Miller interview with Liefeld, Miller said that while he was at Marvel, he was told not worth it to create any new IP while at Marvel by Stanley. Well, yeah, exactly. When Miller was hot at Marvel, they were no longer paying the same level of royalties as in the 1980s. So what was the point of creating something new? Right. So that's why I don't understand why everybody goes along with this. So they say, well, I created Spider Blue of Earth 9000 to 1200. Okay, and
what's got you? They're not royalties. They're incentives.
But he didn't get any royalties or
that was the rule at Marvel. You had to, in order to get anything, you had to have a certain amount of books sold, and then you got something from it. And then there was, in the early contracts in the 90s, where if your artwork was used on something, you got a copy of that thing. That's why we had a freelance liaison. Was her job to make sure that, we put your character on the shirt. We put the character.
Sounds like a department that doesn't make any money. Let's get rid of her.
That's exactly what happens. Yeah. So
Yeah,
art
so now,
returns fell under that department.
yeah, what you have now is a bunch of idiots crafting all of these alternate characters, and they're only doing it for the paycheck.
Yep.
There aren't even any incentives.
No, and it's not that much paychecks because if they use your new character in a movie, you get about $5,000 and that's it. And you may get a thank you of what your work is on the end of the movie in the credits, only to find out that that thank you, thanks to the works of XYZ, is only in the theatrical release. It's not shown on the
Ah.
DVDs and the sales. That's why people have been taking photos in the theater to get at least a physical copy of that credit because the credit's
Huh.
not going to show up anywhere else.
Huh.
You said it. You didn't create any new IP, actually. Yeah, I believe that.
Mm-hmm.
That's why.
Oh yeah, they like doing the word around it in the sense of like who created Spider Gwen, and
Yeah.
it's like is it Gwen Stacy or is it? So it was like they start playing with the wordage and what is created and again they keep playing with the words to the point where it's like it's so diluted that you're not really sure who created what, and that's done on purpose so people don't get the monetary value later.
Life will explain how Feige couldn't care less about comic. Well, yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, you supposedly create a new supposedly new character, and they don't invite you to the premiere.
Yeah, nothing new there about people not caring about comic book creators.
Oh yeah.
Hey, Tit Goblin's here. Has there been any instances where a Marvel or DC character was bought back by the creator or someone else? I'm sure.
Bought as in like they went in and paid for it to get it back. No.
Yes,
No.
no. Actually, only once at Marvel. Remember that? What was that thing called? Claremont and John Bolton did barbarian warrior.
Murata?
Yeah, Murata the She-Wolf. Exactly.
Okay.
They were allowed to buy it back because they hadn't published it yet.
It happens. It happens sometimes at DC if you weren't Alan Moore, where your project for Vertigo or something went out of print, and you a certain number of years later you could get the copyright on it back. I think that's happened a few times by projects DC has no use for.
Right.
I can't think of what they are now, but I know.
Well, I remember Outlaw Nation, which was a Vertigo comic, getting it was never reprinted. And there's a black and white essential style omnibus from a different company. I'm not sure if it was Desperado Publishing, but it was something like that. I think it came out through Image.
And that's what was supposed to happen to Watchmen, except DC said, "Nah, we're going to keep this in print forever, so we don't have to give it up."
Yeah.
That's why Alan Moore is so pissed.
Paramount can stay happily ignorant of my corrections until I sell them. Well, Paramount probably wouldn't pay you royalties for coming up with the rules of Star Trek time travel. Angela required a lawsuit for Neil Gaiman to get it back because they weren't royalties; they were love checks. Dreadstar was
so that was creator owned.
That was always creator owned. Even when he appeared in the Metamorphosis Odyssey, the concept of Epic Illustrated was to mimic how the contracts were handled by Heavy Metal magazine.
Right.
That's why there's Dave Sim material in Epic Illustrated. Otherwise, he never would have done it.
Right.
And even with Epic, you have to remember, we gotta know that as corporations buy each other out, once Disney bought Marvel, they were checking on those Epic projects to see if they could keep them, even though the contracts were signed that no, that's a creator-owned project. the Disney lawyers went and checked and sent out letters going, "We're keeping these," and it was a few creators that was like, "No, our contract says they're ours." Oh, let's see those contracts. We don't have copies of them. It's like, so I've watched a couple of artists have to fight to go, no, this is my epic project. It belongs to me. You're not getting it. And then they walked away, but they will give it a try.
Yeah.
You make sure you keep copies of all those contracts.
Hello, Paramount. You got your time travel wrong. Nobody cares, Limey. Hell, exactly. You get it. Oh, there you correct me. But that's my universal purpose, SG.
Yes, he's here to completely destroy my childhood views of the comic
Exactly.
industry.
Amazing Fantasy number 15 was not meant to be the last issue.
What Stan said.
Well, by the way, I got a third issue this week where I never got the second issue.
Oh.
You'll Do Bad Things. This is by Boss Tub Talisi and Atsmin El How. And this is, for some reason, second issue never came into my comic shop. I saw like last month a bunch of people had it on. I saw maybe Sleepy had it on his channel, and I was like, "Oh, did I not order that?" And I was like, "Oh, I guess I never got that one on my pull list." But no, I did. Just no copies ever came into my comic shop. I asked about it this week. I'm like, "Hey, where's number 2?" And they looked it up, and they're like, no copies ever came in. So they're going to have to order them from Lone Star. That's what they do with current stuff that they can't get from the distributor anymore. They order them from Lone Star and get them for us. But yeah, this is a one where I didn't really miss the second issue. It worked pretty well without it. As I read it, I was like, I'm not waiting for the second issue. A writer thinks he's a killer because the stories he's writing are coming true. The crime stories. So no one quite believes him, because who could believe such a crazy thing? But so far, that's the plot, and it's pretty good. I'm enjoying it. So I enjoyed the first and third issue.
I like that cover design.
Yeah, pretty nice.
So let's go for some more Peter David.
What do you got?
Something that Peter David hated. So there's a Peter David story in here.
Okay.
And this is a man. I think this is a 500. Yeah, this is a 260-page comic, and the cover has become unglued. But so this is Executioner's Song, and of course, Peter David was writing X Factor at the time. And as per usual, he got lumped into the summer crossovers, whether he liked it or not. So you have to have the other X-Men show up. Also, Larry Stroman had just been replaced by this new guy called Jay Lee, whose art at this stage in his career was far from the best.
Here's what you need to fix your book. Neutral pH adhesive, book glue. I have no idea why I bought this. I just noticed it over in the corner of the room. I think I bought it a few months ago for some reason that I've forgotten. It's not even opened. And I'm like, why did I buy this? I can't remember. I guess I was going to glue a book, maybe? What book?
Yeah.
I don't know.
The thing is, these are usually stapled, but this one can't be stapled because it's 260 pages.
Yeah.
That's why I bought it. Whoa, a 260-page comic.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, after a few decades, the glue disappears.
Yeah, I have a book that I can't even open because of how much whatever the glue that was on it, it just disintegrates.
It just cracks. You hear it
just
crackle.
crack, and you could just, if you open the book, it's just the sheer amount of this glue just falls apart. Now I don't know if that was just the original glue on it, or if someone attempted to fix it and they used like wood glue. I don't know, but I have a book like that, a trade paperback.
Mhm. And the pages are newsprint because this was printed in the same place as the regular 80-page digest magazine. So yeah, if I try to glue it, I probably get all a bunch of pages stuck together forever.
Yeah.
Sequential Geek recommends Peter David's X Factor. Yeah, the thing is, if you try to read Peter David's X Factor all at once, you can tell that the crossover issues are just in the way. They make it an unsatisfying read. That era of Jay Lee is in my top 5 artists. Oh, how dare I? There are plenty. I will always sustain that Jay Lee did not only learn how to draw when he had to learn how to write, which was when he was doing Hellshock. And then he came up with his new style that he used in the Inhumans, and finally he was a good artist.
I think that's when I first started liking his stuff too. Was the Inhumans.
It was like District X and X Factor took place in. Oh right, that's the more recent 2000s X Factor, where Peter David finally could do whatever he wanted. He also focused a lot more on Madrox. Jim Lee has some vicious Wolverine illustration. Yeah. Jim Lee, no, they're not related.
No.
Of course, they used to say back then, Jim Lee is Stan Lee's son.
I remember hearing that every now and then.
Lee is a fairly common surname in Korea, so like Kim. So they're not related.
There's a lot of Lees. And Stan Lee isn't even a Lee.
Right.
He made that up. Let's see, what else do I have over here?
You made that up too?
The final issue of Howl, 5 of 5. I very much enjoyed this one. I really like the art in it by, let's see, what was his name again? Morissette, who we looked up when the series first started. Was he Belgian?
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah,
and this is an alien invasion story, but it's sort of like an invasion of the body snatchers. And I like it. It had an interesting ending. I won't give it away, but different than most sort of alien invasion endings that I know of. And it's loosely based on the Alyssa Quitley, the writer's parents, who were a couple of writers in the 50s in late 50s in Greenwich Village in New York City. If Sleepy's still here, he can tell us who her father is, because he was a almost famous short story sci-fi writer. I don't remember his name, but Sleepy knows him, or at least knows of him. But yeah, I enjoyed this 5-issue series from Ahoy Comics. I don't think I ever see like any shelf copies of Ahoy Comics at my LCS. I pre-ordered that one because I liked the cover and artwork I saw in it. But like I said, I don't think I ever saw a copy like on the shelf, which is how it is with most of my comics. Mm-hmm. Good point, Stan Lee's son. His long lost son from his Korean War days.
He never set foot in the war. He was writing scripts for propaganda movies in the U.S. Army, or for propaganda manuals, something like that. All right, so let's see some more Peter David. And what do we have here? The Last Avengers story. with
Aha.
with A-State covers.
They're just shining at us. The
Yeah,
last Avengers story. There we
exactly. But Peter David actually came to Portugal in 1999, and I had just bought these, and I got them signed
Oh, cool.
Nice.
inside the estate cover. Both
Wasn't
issue.
there a brief period where the last stories were popular? The last Avengers
Yeah,
story, the last
yeah,
Fantastic Four story.
they did the Hulk. They did a last Fantastic Four story, which was based on on a Jack Kirby story, and then they did all those the End projects, X-Men the
Ah,
End, Wolverine the End, Hulk the End, and they reprinted this as Avengers the End. But this is
okay.
these are the original. This is the original miniseries from 1995 or six. 1995 exactly, because they still have the Alterniverse logo,
Uh-huh.
which they also put on projects like Ruins, which are that Warren Ellis's take on Marvels, but dystopian. And they also put this logo on What If, which is the only ongoing title featuring alternate realities. And this was the first time I saw Ariel Olivetti art.
Ah, okay. I'm trying to think of the first time I saw his art.
Yeah, let me put myself big again. This is kind of muddy now.
Yeah. Can't see much.
And I think it's on purpose. This is not.
It's shiny, muddy, and you don't have high enough resolution.
Yeah. These are. Can't tell. These are Ultron and Kang, and Ultron looks a lot more humanoid because he reinvented himself. Also, everybody else is older. So Hank Pym in his West Coast Avengers jacket, but he's older and fatter. Cannonballs is in the Avengers. She-Hulk is still in the Avengers. There's a couple of guys that nobody's heard of, and this has Doctor the Sorcerer Supreme is one of the Vision Wanda's and Vision's children, because they appear here as adults. And so even then, they thought it was a good idea for them to have children, even if in the original story, Byrne retconned them as not being real. But I think everybody was in love with the idea, even Peter David in 1995.
Ah, 1995, a long time ago.
Oh yeah.
That mid 90s period during Marvel's bankruptcy kind of gets lost
Yeah.
in sort of the
It's just
history of
like,
comics and stuff to talk about.
yeah. There's like, for me, it's like there's certain time period things that's like, which came before what,
Right.
and things were just running so fast that it's like I get confused on certain things. It's like, wait, did this happen first, then this, or
And
yeah,
and Marvel was like in a holding pattern. So it was tough for them to plan as much as, they did later on.
right.
It's tough to have an editorial philosophy when you're not sure if you're going to be there tomorrow.
Well, yeah, it was that. It was the whole, right. Were the 5 editors before the bankruptcy?
I don't even remember.
It was
So
the five.
you had the 5 editors
Mhm.
where it's like, okay, this is your universe, this is your portion, and then that's it. Like, you guys shouldn't even talk to each other, and then that eventually led to, Bob Harris becoming editor in chief.
Oh yeah, that was long before then. Yeah, because
Yeah, and then the bankruptcy, but you had Marvolution was going on at the early time of that, I think 94, where they were, oh yeah, let's remember the past, and then, but we're going to forget all of it. It was crazy at that time.
Yeah.
Two of the coolest Hulk covers would be Peter David books, actually. Hulk 340 and She-Hulk Pulp Fiction.
Ah,
Hulk
okay.
441.
We just saw the Hulk one, and I can actually picture that She-Hulk one. So
Yep.
they're certainly memorable.
So the Hulk cover that I got to work on was the special AIDS issue. Trying to put the ribbon on that cover was a story in itself. And it was like, so I was able to put it onto the cover. We were using Photoshop, and I think they were trying to make sure the color was correct because it represented AIDS. And then the cover was reused in a Wizard magazine as a poster. That's how I got involved, because Wizard contacted Marvel through the conventions department. So I was like putting that cover together so they can have it early. And all it was really just cut and paste with Photoshop, but early Photoshop. I don't recall if I had to make a paste up mechanical for it.
Huh.
And so it was like, kind of became a big deal to do that. Not too long after that I was doing conventions, and I got to meet Peter David for the first time at a con. That's where I got to meet him. And during the conventions, one of the jobs that I had as an intern was to make sure that if you came to the booth and you didn't have anything to get signed, if you didn't come with your own books, we made sure there was something for you to get signed. So this way here, if you showed up and did not know that this particular artist or writer was going to be there, we actually had giveaways made just for these artists. So I made sure that I had books for every artist and writer that was there at the time. And it was fun because you're just going through the catalog going, order this many copies of this book, this many copies of that book. And at the time we had the Marvel booth, and this was this like, it basically recreated the Danger Room. Marvel spent a whole load of money for this booth. It had
Those were the days.
it had a rotating planet, and the rotating planet had red lights on it that showed every Marvel office at the time. So it's the East Coast office, West Coast office, Pacific Rim office, and Marvel UK. And I think there was something in Texas. I'm a little fuzzy on that. And oh no, sorry, the booth was housed in Texas. So the booth had its own warehouse that it would go to, and it had its own staff to build it and break it down and travel with it.
Wow.
So Marvel was spending money. So you had these consoles that had like what looked like big Danger Room monitors, but all it was a place to put a giant poster, and they would be switched out for whatever art or convention thing we were promoting. But under these monitors were these drawers that had the books that we kept. So they were smart in designing this thing, because they made it where they would have storage for it. And so where the tables were being signed, right behind the artist would be their own books.
Ah.
So I was in charge of making sure the books were in the right place and stuff like that. So at some point, we couldn't find Peter Davis's books. And it was because we also worked in shifts. So I wasn't there for the closing shift, so I didn't know where the books got put. So Peter kept telling me, no, you're looking in the wrong drawer. The books are in this drawer. And I'm thinking, well, no, they're not supposed to be there. And it's like, no, trust me, they're in those drawers right there. So I go in, I open the drawer, get a couple of boxes out, and sure enough, his books was in there. So I was like, oh, Peter, you were right. And it's like, of course I was right. You should have listened to me. You should have listened to me in the first place. I am always right. It's like, son of a bitch. And that was like the first time that I got to actually meet Peter was at the con at that time.
Retcons are changing the past without even any time travel. No wonder I can't stand them. There are no rules for retcons.
Retcons.
Mhm.
You know what I don't like? I don't like prequel stories.
Right, because you already know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I want time to keep moving forward, to go back, and I'm like, But I like
Especially,
history.
especially when everyone wants to add their own
Yes.
little twist to an origin story.
Oh,
Oh, I wanted to retell Superman's origin. Why?
the
Because you're smarter than
spider
everyone
crawled
else?
away. The spider crawled away and bit someone else.
Yep. And that's how we have Silk.
It's like, come on. Then the
Yeah.
spider continued to crawl away.
And
You
kept
didn't
biting
notice
people.
this other person also got bit.
Because
And it
we need-
jumped into the multiverse.
Yeah.
The nuclear experiment opened a tear in the space-time continuum, and a spider fell into that and bit someone else. Those tricky spiders.
Secret Wars from 2015 was actually a good retcon that could have been turning their comics into action, but insert Jim Lucian. But no, and I could tell that they were never going to turn their comics into actual Marvel comics. In fact, the whole point of Secret Wars from 2015 was to turn Marvel comics into not Marvel comics.
I'd like to defend Marvel Comics for a minute. Reading all those Chris Geruso covered books that I bought, I would have to say most of them were pretty good. Not books that I'm going to buy. They're not to my taste, but at least they were good comics. Maybe they're the idea of young people today's Marvel comics. I don't know. They're not our old guy Marvel comics, but they're never gonna be.
No, not at all. They're
Maybe
now
they're somebody's Marvel comics. I just don't know who.
the 12-year-olds who are reading them now that will go defend them later, because I could not stand, the Clone Saga, but there are fans out there that
Yeah.
are meeting now who are like, they were children when they read it and they loved every single minute of it. Where it's
Mhm.
like, we have trauma from it for being there. And when you have a company trying to not let Wizard Magazine get the scoop on stories and changing it in the middle of the stories, because you read enough comics, the direction is going to go, and a lot of the people at Wizard figured it out. It's going to go here,
Yeah.
and writers at Marvel's like, oh, we can't let Wizard be right.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like, I remember seeing there was a memo talking about, I think it was like, let's finally do Wolverine's origin because we're not going to let Wizard do it for us.
Yeah.
Something like that going on at some point.
Yeah. It was always Captain Atom.
And mutants don't have origins.
Yeah, they were born with it. It was
What Wolverine's origin? Yeah, Wolverine's origin is I'm the best there is at what I do.
Yeah.
Yep.
There.
Anybody remember what actually happened in Wolverine Origin? Because I don't. I just remember there was a kid Wolverine running around. Well, I think
God,
it
it's so
turned out not to
annoying.
be Kid Wolverine.
It was a kid Wolverine running around who may really be his father.
Yeah.
It was just, again.
And that he was called Creed, and he looked like Sabretooth, but he wasn't Sabretooth. Yeah.
Yeah, you
weird.
find out that his love for redheads is more of a fetish than it is than it is something like his first love happened to be redhead, so now he always falls in love with the redheads.
And I remember that was early coloring over pencils art too.
Yes.
Wolveroach, that's right.
Wolveroach.
Mutant origin. Kid hits puberty. Hello, Eric B. Yeah, the guy, the Creed. Yeah, the guy's name was the Creed. The the guy who looked like Creed was called Doug.
Yeah.
But there was the old man. The old man was Creed. No, wait.
Did
The
they-
old man was Logan. The old man was Logan because James Howland was not Logan.
Yeah, didn't they do something where like the kid who was supposed who you expected to be Wolverine wasn't really Wolverine? And that story, I don't even remember.
It was confusing at the beginning, and it stayed confusing.
Confusing at the beginning, confusing in the
Yep.
middle, confusing at the end.
And haven't gone back to read it.
Nope. And speaking of confusing, new issue of the Department of Truth. And I got to say, if you've never read an issue of Department of Truth, as I was reading this, I was thinking, I'm pretty sure this will make no sense to you. Because it's got like, they don't always name the characters. Starts with a couple of people talking about, it doesn't introduce you to them. You have to have read the other issues to know what's going on. Then it switches over to two other characters who they don't really introduce. Who, if you haven't read the other issues, you'll have no idea what's going on in this conversation. And it's followed up by the characters turning into cartoons somehow as the conversation goes on. Then I think we have a third. Here we go. Now we've got a third scene change with a couple of other characters who they don't identify till halfway through the conversation. And they keep switching between the conversations. If you've never read this before and you picked up this issue, you would never read an issue again. I mean, I picked up on what was going on because I've read 29 issues of it, but I was just like, wow, this is so new reader unfriendly. It's amazing. But a solid issue but really, who's going to pick up the Department of Truth number 30 as their first issue? No one. But me being an old head, that's just kind of what I think about when as I'm reading it.
That's why we'll stick to just reading number one issues.
Yeah, there you
I'll
go.
never feel lost.
Yeah, Wolverine Origin was kind of like Wuthering Heights.
Though I was just reading, I went into the Facebook history section, and I picked up some Marvel first issue like 10 years ago. And my quote on Facebook was, it was like, I don't even remember what the issue is at this moment, but it was like some first new issue, crossover, reboot, whatever. I picked up just on a lark. And at the beginning of this first issue, it says, before you read this issue, read Avengers 257 and Spider-Man 248 or something like that. And I was like, what? It's a first issue.
And you already have homework?
How can I have to have read 2 issues before the first issue? Then I think I later commented that didn't matter. I didn't need to read those other 2 issues. I understood the issue fine.
And I have here another Peter David
What do
comic.
you got for us? You've got a lot of Peter David, I must say.
I do. Portuguese edition of Heroes Return.
Aha.
There had been a new publisher, and Marvel wanted them to start with Onslaught, and after that they had Heroes Reborn and Heroes Return. But by that time, the publisher had figured out that an ongoing titles were not going to work, and they switched to mostly trade paperbacks, original trade paperbacks. So this is at the time when Salvador Larroca's art was not very good.
Now, which comics were it that went over to the Image guys and then came back? It was Fantastic Four,
Iron Man,
Captain America,
And Avengers.
and Avengers.
themselves.
Yes, the Hulk was in that universe, but he appeared in Iron Man. So there are 2 Hulks here because Bruce Banner went into Onslaught, and so he became the Hulk of the Heroes Reborn universe. While Bannerless Hulk stayed in the Marvel universe and eventually started deteriorating because since Peter David started writing after they had the deterioration story that forced Doc Samson to remerge the Hulk with Banner. He knew that they should not exist for long as separate beings. So
Now, was it Peter David who came up with the whole pocket universe idea?
no,
I
You
this
know?
don't know.
Yeah, I don't
I
either.
no, that could have been. Would have been Lobdell at the time.
Because they
could have
had
been
no
looked
idea at the beginning. I know
right.
Yeah, it
that.
was just that it turned out that Franklin always had them in his ball,
Yeah.
and that would have
Although
been from the X books.
yeah,
At
if it
the time.
wasn't Lobdell's idea, it was at least Bob Harris's, because
Okay.
they probably needed an in-story way to get them back if
Right.
sales in Heroes Reborn had not worked, and they would bring the characters back.
Well, by the time Heroes Reborn was, or no, yeah, that, which one was the Image guys one? That was Heroes Reborn, and then there was Heroes Return.
Heroes
That
Return
Right.
was right. Heroes Reborn ends, and Heroes Return has them coming back.
Okay. But by the time Heroes Reborn came out, the guys who made the deal with Liefeld and the crew were already gone from Marvel.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
So
that's
yeah,
what happened a lot in those days. It was crazy. There were always new vice presidents or whatever
Always
their
new
titles
vice
were.
presidents. They were new executives, and then there's the story goes. Hey, Chris, welcome. The
Hello
story
there.
goes. One of those people that made that deal never looked at the artwork. She only looked at the numbers of what these guys pulled in the past.
Oh, yeah.
So she got copies of the books, and she was going through it, and she's like, "Wait, this doesn't look as good as I thought it was going to." And it's like, "Yeah, did you know?" It's like, I knew these guys were popular because they went by metrics from years ago when they were at the height.
Right.
It's like it was amazing on some of the decisions made there.
Yeah, and like I said, I think it was never going to get renewed because the people who like hired them in the beginning were gone already. And that happened a lot in that era where some vice president would come up with a new plan, implement the plan, and he wouldn't even be around to. People were just getting Marvel on their resume. I think at least that was
Yes, that
that
was
was
the
the
rumor.
talk.
Like they wanted to just have that on the resume.
Marvel on your resume was a good thing. So they'd come in, they'd work, they'd use Marvel to leverage them to a better job. So I was like, huh. At least that was the scuttlebutt down in the bullpen. I don't really
Yes.
know what went on up on those upper floors. But there was always new initiatives but by the time the initiative was over, there was nobody there to even say, hey, let's do more of this, or that was just kind of petered out.
are we going to pick up that conversation about who invented how to draw chains? No, because
No.
I already showed McFarlane art, and there were no chains in the
Now hold
Incredible
on a
Hulk.
second. Why did we? I don't understand. Why did we not look at Hulk 181 cover? Wilson missed this last week. Chris and I arguing. Though I'm not quite sure what we were arguing about.
You claimed
181,
that
so that's first
I didn't
appearance.
claim. I claimed back in. I don't know if you remember this back in the Spawn Todd McFarlane days. Todd McFarlane said that he drew Spawn all in chains because he figured out an easy way to draw chains. That's why Spawn is all in chains.
Okay.
And I said other people picked up on that easy way to draw chains. And that's why you saw chains proliferate during those time period. Chris says no, he learned how to draw those chains, never having even heard of Todd McFarlane. Well, I'm kind of putting those words in his mouth. because
He's
my idea is people like if you look at I looked at that Hulk 181 cover. People used to draw chains in an illustrative way. They would try to capture sort of the perspective of the chains. What McFarlane did was he drew them in a graphic design way. They were just two boxes, no perspective, and he'd layer them to get a sense of depth. But he wouldn't try to draw the change in perspective. Then Chris got mad at that whole idea, and I don't know if he was accusing me of being wrong or Todd McFarlane of being wrong. I'm not really sure. At this point,
I was accusing Jared Osborne of
because I just
suggesting
read that years ago.
you read that, and I don't dispute that Todd McFarlane said that.
Okay.
But what I think you're doing is leaping to the idea that nobody else on their own could have figured out that very exact same very thing, especially considering we're talking about like
I'm saying you're right. I did not see anyone else figure that out. And if you look at that original Hulk 181 cover, he was drawing them illustratively. And that's why there were not a lot of chains in comics until Todd McFarlane.
These subtle details that you would point to as being these are illustrative and they're in perspective here still starts with the easy shorthand, and then you can just kind of add a little when you're inking. And then you called up an example that we could not agree on, that we were all looking at the same thing.
Well, let me bring up Hulk 181. I'll pull a copy of my, because that's the one you were copying, right? Let's see. I should have had a copy out before now.
Timey Wimey Limey says it was about whether chains can time travel, or if so, whether they would change the past, or perhaps I'm retconning the conversation. We're all retconning.
I can't believe we're doing this again.
The fans demand it.
Are you loving this, Wilson?
I'm fascinated by it.
If you look there,
those are Herb Trimpe.
These are illustrative ones. You notice they go back in space. Those ones back there are more graphic designy. But there's a difference between illustrative and graphic. These ones are harder to draw because you've got to get them going back into space. And if we look at, hold on, let me get my Chris Geruso ones. You got that right over here. And if you look at these, they do not go back in space.
And so Jared says...
And I'm saying Todd McFarlane said he figured out this way to draw chains. That's why he draped Spawn in chains. And I said a lot of people picked up on that from Todd McFarlane and started draping all their characters in chains. And I think Chris said, no, they were chains. I don't know what Chris said. I'm not really sure. He disagreed with me.
What I'm saying is, whether or not they started doing chains because Spawn became popular, chains became cool, sure, I'll give you that. I'm not debating that.
Okay.
What I'm saying is, his shortcut is not as profound as you seem to be suggesting that it is, as if nobody else.
That's because you
would
weren't
naturally
around
do the
in the
same
days
thing.
before his shortcut. To you, his shortcut is how things are done. If you were around in the days before his shortcut, you might think differently. You're like saying the car isn't that big of an invention because you have always had cars.
Last week, you showed an example of Superman breaking chains.
Yes. Actually, Paolo showed that one.
Yeah.
Okay. Paolo and I agreed that it was the Todd McFarlane approach. And you, looking at the same picture, said no.
I said some of it was. The ones going back in space weren't. Just like on this one I showed you right here. The ones in silhouette are graphic designy.
So
The actual ones are illustrative.
So what you're doing then is you're saying there are two examples of people doing it with Todd McFarlane's shortcut before Todd McFarlane was even drawing professionally.
Well, that's just a silhouette, so it's not quite the same.
It was Jerry Siegel.
But people, when people drew chains, they wanted them to be realistic. Todd McFarlane turned them into a graphic design element.
Wilson,
yes, Jerry Siegel.
What about Jerry Siegel?
Wilson, welcome to the Chain Police podcast.
Jerry Siegel did not draw Superman stories in a realistic manner.
But he drew those chains in a semi-realistic.
It's cartoony.
As they went back in space around his body, changed perspective. They weren't.
It's cartoony and it's simple.
Yeah, it is. I know it is cartoony and simple, but he's still drawing illustratively. He's not drawing them as a graphic design element. His chains are literal as he breaks them. Spawn's chains are a graphic design element. That's why they're always. There's two things. They're flat, always in non-perspective. He tried to get you to believe those chains were wrapping around him. Yes, those are illustrative chains. He's trying to get us to believe that those chains are coming out at us. That's an illustrative element, not a graphic design element.
What so Todd McFarlane
does. Todd McFarlane. By the way, those are beautiful, Chris. That's a great look.
Then it turns more into a graphic design. But if you notice, you're getting your depth from the illustrative nature of the chains. Todd McFarlane was getting his depth from layering the chains as graphic design elements.
Todd McFarlane was speaking for Todd McFarlane. He's like, I figured out this is the way I'm doing chains.
He was, and then
it was an easy thing that people have been doing it before him, and people did it after him.
What was that? Oh, so I talked over you. Go back.
So Schuster was doing it before Todd McFarlane.
Okay, let's say that. No? He did it once at least. Can you give me how many times did Schuster? Let's just say Schuster drew them once like that. Did he influence the way everybody else drew chains?
All we need is one example to prove that Todd McFarlane didn't invent a thing no one could do before.
I didn't say no one could do it. I said no one did do it. No one draped their characters in chains as graphic design.
Okay, but that's a different argument. I've never said anything about draping.
I said it all last week. I said draping 900 times.
That is not what we're arguing at all. Wilson, this is a great time, right?
This Wilson is why we're not really sure what we're arguing sometimes.
Yeah, I am not too sure. All I can think of while I'm sitting here is like, there is a brush in Photoshop that just makes chains.
Yeah, you're right. There is a brush now that just draws the chains.
That just connects the chains together.
And it does it the Todd McFarlane way.
It does. It does not give you the depth.
That's okay, Tit Goblin says, here we go. I'm going to take a shower. I would have never survived the bullpen.
It's a good thing I patched in today.
Yeah, sure beats analyzing Total Recall.
By the way, I have a question for Chris that popped up on my TikTok, and I said I'll ask Chris the next time I talk to him. All those covers that you did, the Marvel Universe covers, how long did that take to do?
It took from start to finish probably like 8 months, but it was like it was something I had to keep picking up and putting back down, and so I took a lot of pauses.
Right. Okay. It was just a question came up, and it was like, I have no idea. I'll ask.
To argue his point, Jared has bought $450 of Chris's books. Joke's on you, Chris. Little retcon. Superman 233 Neil Adams chains. Where are those then?
I'm imagining since it's I have it somewhere. I think we glanced at them, but they were more illustrative because it's Neil Adams. He's an illustrative artist. Everything he draws is illustrative.
Yeah, I believe the correct term is semi-realistic, illustrative, cartoony, non-perspective graphic representation. Didn't Power Man have a chain belt back in the
That's
70s?
the most you got was usually chain belts, and every time there was like a costume redesign, there went the chain belt.
I
Did
would
Ghost
I
Rider have?
would say that cover, that Superman cover by Neil Adams, issue 233, those chains are flat.
I would have to look.
I don't think they're in perspective. I think they're graphically, which is what I would suspect from Neil Adams.
Right, he did knock that one out. I remember too. He said that those were.
Yeah.
Did Ghost Rider have
that cover?
Chains Ghost Rider had chains 2 years before Spawn.
Yeah, but he wasn't draped in. He had that chain weapon.
He had the chain whip, and then he had it around his.
Right.
This is the quality content I subscribe for.
He kept.
Who are all the characters post Spawn that are draped in chains?
I don't even remember. They were around in the 90s.
Yeah, there was a kill something kill, black kill
death somebody, love
blood
death,
kill
death.
blood.
And 90% of them were created by Rob Liefeld.
And also, the bigger so I remember guys having giant chains on them too. So because like the bigger you draw the chain, the fewer links you have to draw.
We need a read, rip, and slap chains on the covers edition.
I'll have to look for them.
So Neil does that. Neil does that Superman cover again later on, and then those are done in perspective by the looks of it.
Yeah, because I think that first one he hated.
Yes,
because he knocked it out in an afternoon.
About it. He didn't like the legs on it. He had complained. So the next one he did for an Action Comics cover, there's slight. Not too much, but there is slight perspective to it.
Pitt had chains wrapped around his wrists. That's right, too.
Yes.
He had big, chunky ones, I think.
Yeah, because he was supposed to be an alien biker.
Yeah. Did Something Lobo like have chains wrapped around him?
I think he used one as like a belt. And then his weapon was at the end of a chain.
Yeah.
His J weapon kind of thing was at the end of the chain. I gotta look at chains next time I look at some of these old covers.
I mean, look at how everybody does their chains.
Well, I don't have chains, but I do have BDSM in a Peter David comic.
Sax and violins.
Sax and violins.
Oh yes, when DC published the straight paperback, I knew I was going to get it. And it's pretty good, and it's even got the original 90s coloring style.
Lens flares.
So we don't have chains, but we do have chokers and whips and lingerie. Well, I'm sure we can try to find a chain here. See what George Paris thinks about chains.
And I'm pretty sure that's one of those books that I got at the comic book shop, but was not reading on the bus. Because, not used to the European covers. So that might have, or the European comics. So that issue might have made me blush.
It still has George Paris action scenes.
Oh yeah.
This was a pretty fun read, actually.
I have never read that one.
So if people bought it because they thought it was kinky, It's got kinky moments, but it's still an adventure story.
Oh, by the way, did you know we have another Pulitzer Prize winning cartoonist?
Oh,
Who's that?
Tessa Hulse, for her graphic novel Feeding Ghosts, won the Pulitzer Prize for
Oh,
this
you
year.
know what? I think I saw a headline. I didn't get to read it, but I wasn't sure what that was about. Very well, congratulations to her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a done in one. She's not doing any more graphic novels. That one took her freaking 7 years.
Hey, she won the prize.
I know.
It's like, don't need to do it again.
Yeah. It's like, I'm not doing this again. But it's amazing how someone we've never heard of can win the Pulitzer Prize. Because I assume you guys haven't heard of Tessa Hulse either.
well, cartoonists in newspapers or magazines are.
Oh,
they're not.
this is neither of those. This is a graphic. This is a straight up original graphic novel.
Hmm.
Chain Draper from 1947.
Chester Chainsaw.
Chainsaw.
Rolling around he's not rolling around in his grave because he's bound by chains.
Yes. He's static with his chains weighing on him.
Captain America in Chains and Across His Mouth as well by Cassidy for cover Captain America number 8.
851. Yeah, I don't remember that one. But that was way Cassidy's Captain America run was the early 2000s, right?
Yep. Long time ago.
A long time. Let's see, what else did I get? Bitter Root, issue number 3 of 5, with the Sanford Green art. At least I assume it's Sanford Green. They don't credit. They credit David F. Walker, Chuck Brown, and Sanford Green as creators. And this is the one about the takes place in the 60s. Volume 1 took place in the 20s. About the black family. They were in Harlem, who fight the Jinnu, these monsters, and they have to fight racism an awful lot too. And in the 20s, they tried to keep it quiet that these monsters named the Jinnu, it kind of existed on Earth and they were fighting them. But then something big happened and everybody became aware of the Jinnu. But now by the 60s, no one believes they were around in the 20s anymore. They're like, yeah, we got rid of them. Well, who are they? So another fun Bitter Root story. I'm enjoying that series.
Sequential Geek says Regina King was going to direct a Bitter Root movie.
Ah. I wonder if it was just a passing fancy, or who's Regina King? What has she done? I don't even. I'm not a huge. I'm not extremely knowledgeable about. Oh, she's producing the movie. I'm not extremely knowledgeable about the movie business and directors. Mm-hmm. So Regina King, I do not know.
So when normal people ask us comic book fans what do we think about the comic book movie, we say, what comic book movie?
What comic book movie? Bitter Root.
They make movies about comics? They would never do that. It's
Why
childish.
would they do that? That sounds just silly.
Mm-hmm. Movies are supposed to be serious.
They make comic book movies so all the internet people can claim their failures.
Mm-hmm.
Now she's directing as well.
Well, make up your mind, Regina King.
Quit teasing us with that Bitter Root movie.
Yeah. Next, you'll be saying that she's catering the movie.
What are you working on tonight, Chris? Some more, what are they called? Custom ones? Ah, fantastic.
Just a sketch cover.
Eric
Regina King
P.
has mainly been an actress. She was on the TV show 227 in Southland.
Okay, 2 shows I've never watched, but I know exist.
I saw Southland because the theme show for the is a Portuguese song. Her son killed himself, unfortunately, a few years ago, so not in the works at the moment.
Ah, that's sad. Suicide is sad. Let's
Well,
see.
she was wasn't she in Watchmen? Did you just say that?
Regina King?
I don't know. I've never seen Watchmen, so I picked up I did get issue 2 of this one. We're taking everyone down with us, and this is the one. What does that say? A Rook spy thriller. I don't know if this is the first Rook one. This is one that's about the James Bond type villain, and the Rook is the James Bond type character. But this is mainly about the villain. Oh, we're getting poison gassed. And the villain that was who? The Vitruvian. There we go. And James Bond character was making a move on him, and even though the Vitruvian hadn't been seen for 20 years, and the Vitruvian's got a teenage daughter, and the book's mostly about her now, and there's the robot who's her friend, who's protecting her, and now the villains are after her, the James Bond people are after her, and it's fun stuff. Let's see who's doing this one. This one is writing Matthew Rosenberg, art Stefano Landini, colors Jason Wordy, and letterers Hassan Atsmain El How. So another
Rosenberg.
good issue.
Rosenberg is the type of writer who leads the whole race and then trips and falls flat on his face just when he's hitting the finish line.
Well, I've been reading his and Tyler Boss's. His and Tyler Boss's. What's the furthest place from here? I've been reading there. That's
because his work on the X-Men and the Punisher was a failure.
Well, he was one of those quirky indie guys who got a shot at Marvel. Sometimes those guys, not everyone's Ed Brubaker. Who's a quirky indie guy who becomes big at Marvel or DC. Let's see. The last one for the week is Feral, issue number 13. And this was a good one. This is the one that's about the cats. We got a dog in this one, too. Sort of a cat zombie story. And this issue is kind of a heist, but a backwards heist. They're trying to break into this pet store so that they can get some food and shelter. But the pet store is surrounded by these rabid zombie cats and pets. So this one's all about them trying to break into that pet store. So good stuff. This has been a good series. Tony Fleece is the writer. Trisha Forstner is one of and Tone Rodriguez are the 2 artists. So this one continues. Our Walking Dead animal story.
No, I didn't get. I also had some of Peter David's Captain Marvel, the one with Janice Vell, but I didn't take anyone out. And I do have one story that I bought in a French Marvel comic. This is the first time someone has done more than push the Stray Dogs or Feral variant cover. But I did pick up a few other things by Peter David, which are not comics.
Wasn't Paul Azaceta's first Marvel gig a Peter David Captain Marvel, or was someone else writing that?
Can't remember.
He was definitely a Captain Marvel.
That sounds right.
From like 2006, 2007. I can't even remember if it was the male or female.
2007, I guess that No, by 2007 they had shoved the the Captain Marvel title on Carol Danvers.
I remember a green costume, and of
Yes,
course, it wasn't the original Marvel.
that was
It
Janice.
may have been a dude.
It was Janice, yes, and then they introduced a daughter of Marvel, Phyla. She would while Janice was using the uniform of the Kree Space Militia, Phyla was dressed in red and blue, and they were both Captain Marvel.
Okay.
Okay.
And Sequential Geek, both Feral and Stray Dogs are both good comics. So now that you finally got to see the inside of one. Oh, the one of his
No.
Star Trek books?
Yeah, so yeah, you
New
as
Frontier.
you may know, the Star Trek Peter David has written several Star Trek novels,
Right.
including creating a brand new series called New Frontier. This is pretty good because it has it explains the reason why the Starship computer sounds like Majel Barrett.
Huh.
It has Wesley Crusher's girlfriend from season 1 of TNG. It uses Shelby from the second appearance of the Borg when she becomes Riker's second in command after Picard gets turned into Locutus for the second time. And they even use, and Peter David brings back Eric's and Mares from the cartoon from the 70s cartoon show.
So he
My
basically made a
friend,
crew out of other characters that were
oh yeah,
introduced in Star Trek.
Yeah, and he even brings back stuff from other bits of lore, like the Greek gods who appear in TNG. Or
my friend Rob is a big Peter David fan and is a big Star Trek fan, and had all the, and Peter David was his favorite Star Trek novelist. So he always liked how he could pick obscure characters out of the Star Trek lore and do things with them. I think at one point Rob had a complete collection of Star Trek paperbacks. Then, like, I don't even know how long ago, probably 15 years ago, he just gave it up. He's like, I can't buy all these, because I think they started coming out with more and more of them. Tons of
yeah,
them.
there was a point there were going all the way back to the 60s. There were probably over 300. No, there were way more than 300. There were probably 500.
Yeah.
Yeah, depending on how what they focused on. For a long time, I was enjoying the Star Trek books, and there were some that were just better than others. Some read like Star Trek episodes, where other ones were like, "Here's a bunch of characters I don't know about, don't care about." So Charlie Cox is a really good Star Trek writer, uh, but yeah, Peter David is up there with those books.
Yeah, I think at one point, must have been the 90s. That's how long ago he was collecting these books. But like I remember the last books he needed for his collection were the novel adaptations of the animated series. Those were the ones that were like out of print.
Those were pretty good. I did enjoy them.
Yeah, I thought about doing completing the New Frontier series, but then I stopped having the time for it.
Yeah, I think that's what happened to him too. It was like all of a sudden, at one point in time, there was like one Star Trek novel series, but then with all the different spin-off TV shows, all of a sudden, one became four.
Yeah, I even tried buying one the new series set after the last movie, where Riker becomes the captain of his own ship, the Titan.
Titan.
Yeah, but even
It was okay. The funny thing about that story was that you had Tuvok from Voyager on it, and they gets lost in space. Almost just like Voyager, and he just got back from being lost in space, kind of a thing. That was kind of entertaining. I read those maybe the first, I'm looking that way as if I could see the bookshelf with all my Star Trek books, and the problem is, it's right there. I can see the shape because the lights aren't on over there. But I think I got like 4 or 5 of those novels, and I enjoyed them. They were okay.
37 canon, 16 universes, 23 timelines. There are all the timelines, especially because there were novels which were made only when before they created the next generation, and some of those things are retconned by later series and movies, which isn't really a problem because it's accepted that the Star Trek novels are not canon.
Yeah, we
They're
kind of
just
knew
fun.
that when we went in. For a while, the probe was actually attacked by the Borg,
Mm.
so that's why. And V'ger was connected to the Borg. Every now and then, they wanted to connect everything with the Borg.
Yeah, but there was speculation about it even among fan communities.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the 2 Star Trek novels I read many years ago. That were supposedly the 2 best, my friend said. I think they had something to do with a duplicate Kirk and the title Phoenix in the book. But I can't remember what they were now.
Mirror universe stuff.
Well, there may have been Mirror Universe stuff. But it's like the Kirk who was the star of them, I don't think was the real Captain Kirk. But
I never understood what was the big deal about the mirror universe. I mean, the episode's fun, but okay, they did it. It's done. I was never attracted to the idea of having Spock with the goatee that everyone makes a big.
But they
Do
were
not put
evil.
Paolo in charge of your branding.
But they were evil. People
Yes.
want to know what made that universe evil. How did it all go wrong? Because, like I said earlier about Star Trek, doesn't matter what happens in the episode. Everyone on the crew has to be on the crew when it flies off into the sunset.
Mhm.
Where in the novels, in the alternate universe, you can kill anybody you want.
Novels are always a different canon. No, that makes a lot. Yeah, sure.
Oh, look at
DC's new preview shows in August a new Superman, the Kryptonite Spectrum, 5-issue series by the Ice Cream Man team of Maxwell Prince and Morazzo.
So it just makes me a little sad because it means less Ice Cream Man. But I'm happy for them if they're getting some, DC Comics cash. Maybe they can create an evergreen.
They were evil in no
They're
sleeves.
evil
Yeah,
and no sleeves either.
exactly. That's how you know they're evil. They're dressed for the beach.
Exactly.
Next Gen Broken Mirror story was cool. I liked better the story where they had the Denise Crosby came back as a
Romulan.
As a Romulan, yeah.
Her own Romulan daughter.
Mm-hmm. That's not like those William Shatner books he did that everything was linked to him and he made Kirk come back and win every fight. The Shatnerverse. I enjoy parallel universes even more than time travel. Yes. Even if they don't have rules.
Though I did just hear today, for the first time, the mechanism for creating parallel universes, an actual scientific mechanism. Because some other scientists found out it might not be true. Because I always say, the problem with parallel universes is what creates them. In fiction, it's always like it's like human drama creates them. But there's this famous scientific experiment,
the experiment.
photon slit experiment, where it's like you have to send a single, I don't even know how they do this, a single light photon. You send it at a piece of metal that has a slit in it, and as it goes through the slit, it is both a particle and a wave, which is why they say light is both a particle, because for years the scientists were trying to figure out if light was a particle or a wave. But people were saying that multiverse people, like actual scientists, not us, not creatives, were saying that when light becomes a particle and a wave, that creates a parallel universe. So every time light splits and becomes a particle and a wave at the same time, that could create a parallel universe. But then there were some scientists recently who said that doesn't really happen. They don't, but that's a whole other thing. But I was like, that's the first time I heard an actual scientific mechanism. Like, I mean, I don't know how often that happens when scientists aren't aiming one photon at a slit. But that made me think that, if photons can make a parallel universe, then the universe is really, there'd be an infinite number of parallel universes that you could not tell apart from this one. Because
Yeah, because it could just be the only difference between this universe and the next parallel universe is a centimeter where the pen was put down here instead of there. And that's it. And everything else is exactly the same.
Everything else is exactly the same. You couldn't tell. You'd endlessly going through the same exact universe.
Oh, so that's where I left my car keys.
I found that interesting.
The fewer rules, the better. Yes, Jared, I'm wrestling with that very question on my current script.
Yeah, what creates a parallel universe?
Chains.
Chains. Chris and I argue. Chris,
we're caught in a time loop, and we're gonna argue this again next week.
Someone last week during Chris and I arguing about chains was like, this is all because Wilson's not here, giving us that calm energy or something. That calm, acting like everybody's dad, giving us that calm energy.
Gravitons were supposed to be these gravity-causing particles, but then bubbles explain how they were waves.
Yeah.
Well, I don't understand quantum physics.
I don't think that's quantum physics. I think that's still relative. That's still what is gravity. But I don't know.
But they don't. But they don't know what gravity is. They just know what it does.
They don't know what gravity. That's what he said. Some people thought graviton was like a particle of gravity. Gravity is a weak force that works over long distances. That's all they know.
All right. Does anyone else have anything about Peter David that they want to talk about?
I don't think, like I said, I never read that many Peter David books. He was just, I mean, I always thought he was a good writer, but just, I just never read that much mainstream stuff.
Yeah, I read just about all the stuff he did because I was reading all those Marvel books. So that whole Hulk run I read, Hulk Future Imperfect, the whole, Spider-Man 2099, the Spider-Man 2099 and Spider-Man crossover.
And I think I met him back in the day, but I'm not sure.
You know why you don't have by Peter David? His Aquaman series.
I read a little of that, I remember. That was early 2000s?
Mid-90s.
Oh, okay.
That was the Hook Hand years?
Yeah, exactly. That when Peter David was in Portugal, the theme of that year was superheroes. That's why he was invited, and he explained on the panel. He explained his Aquaman pitch. So I'm going to give Aquaman. So I want to write Aquaman, and the editor, I think it was Eddie Briggins, and he's going to have long hair, and a beard. And I'm going to cut off his hand and put a hook in it. What? And so everyone loved it, and because everyone loved it, they couldn't wait to put Aquaman back the way it was supposed to be. And now he was boring again, and nobody was reading. That's the thing is, it was what Jack Kirby had done with Green Arrow, and we don't like this. We want to make Green Arrow boring like he used to be.
Make Green Arrow boring again.
So yeah,
Put Roy Thomas on it.
yeah, so he knew how to shake things up to the point where it's like his work was still used, influenced. I mean, the Aquaman that we got in the movies looks like a biker, most likely because of that Aquaman. They just didn't cut off his hand.
I think I did read a couple of stories in the Brazilian editions. No, wait, that was before. Aquaman already had long hair, and he was dating Dolphin. He was dating Dolphin, not a dolphin. Tammy Wimey says, so my placeholder for a cause of the second universe in my book is chains. I'm going to call it the Osborn-Giarrusso paradox. Marvel 1602. Yeah. I did read it, and the sequel.
I thought it was going to be something interesting, then it just turned into another parallel Earth story.
Yeah. I mean, let's get Neil Gaiman to write the Marvel Universe. Okay. What do you get? Nothing. Superheroes being themselves.
Wilson is the heart and morality of this operation, says Tit Kovler. And I'm the Thing, and Chris is the Human Torch. He's always trying to rile me up. Damn teenager.
All right. So what are we doing next?
I can't wait to finish this because I think maybe more than anybody I know, Jared's going to appreciate the dialogue that I put into this.
Okay.
Nice. Okay, so next week, your hours on StreamYard.
Yep, I should reset. Maybe on my channel next week.
Cool.
Sounds good.
Sounds like a plan.
Give him some confetti. I want to get confetti and balloons at the same time.
You can't. It doesn't let you.
Doesn't let me.
Then we get lasers, and I like lasers.
Lasers are cool. Lasers are cool. A little bit of thunder and rain, maybe. There we go. Little rain.
Visitors from Universe B.
Visitors from Universe B. Can you get chains?
At Universe B, you can get whatever you want.
You can get whatever you want from Universe B.
You can get yourself cleaned. You can have a good meal. You can do whatever you feel. That's Universe B.
Universe B. Chain migration. Wait a sec.
All right. Okay, so thank you all very much for staying with us through all of this conversation about chains, Peter David, and more chains and parallel universes.
And Splat.
And Splat.
Stephen Platt's origin story.
Exactly.
Fun stuff.
Which is on Terry Kavanaugh's YouTube channel.
What did I say was 247?
247. 247.
Or put Terry Kavanaugh's name in the search bar. You should be able to find it too. It was a good show. He and his co-host talking to Stephen. I think he's got a couple others that I haven't checked out. He's got a couple earlier ones maybe.
All right. So we'll meet on Jared's channel next week. Same bad time.
On Chain Talk.
Exactly, on Chain Talk. We're going to rename the show to Chain Talk.
We'll bring it.
All right. Okay.
Take care.
Bye-bye.